Hey everyone, thank you for joining our live session for today. As you can tell, this is the first time we do this, so we've been going through some technical difficulties, but luckily we figured it out. We wasted a little bit of time, but we'll make this up. Just before I get started, I am joined today by my colleague Adria, who will be helping out with the session, playing the role of the producer. So it's kind of like a bit of a radio show. So he'll be behind the mixer and also participate later in this conversation. Maybe you want to say hi, Adria?
I want to say hi. Thank you, everyone, for waiting. Technical issues, but I'll try to mute myself. I think that my mic is going off with some noise. So get to it. Mo, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Adria. All right, so let me share my screen and we'll get this show on the road. So what is this about? First of all, the session today is about rules for how to have meetings that don't suck. I know that as we will see later in the next slide, that this is a topic that is dear to many people's heart, and it's something that everyone suffers every day in the job. So it's definitely a topic that we'd love to talk about today. We'll share some tips, but the main goal of the session is actually to take your questions. My name is Mohannad. I'm the CEO of Hotjar. And for taking your questions, just before I do a little bit of recap, we will use a platform called Slido. So if you go to slido.com and enter the code Hotjar Live, or if you snap the QR code, it will take you to the live Q&A. So feel free to enter your questions. You'll have the opportunity also to upvote questions that you like. And then Adria later will join me to read out your questions, and so I'm not just speaking to a screen. It would be good to have a human being interacting with me. So what's the background story? Like, how did we end up here? It started as a LinkedIn post. So there was actually like another post where there was a bit of discussion. Someone was asking me about how we do meetings and as a distributed remote company. So I decided it's a good opportunity to share actually some guidance that I've published for the team on LinkedIn. Maybe it's useful for others. And I shared it on LinkedIn and it completely blew up. It got, through 300,000 views, thousands of reactions, lots of comments, and a lot of reshares. So, and then there were many questions in the comments. So we thought it's actually a good opportunity for us to do a live session where we take your questions and have the opportunity to talk about some of these points together. So we'll do a quick recap on the points for those of you who haven't read the post. I'll take the opportunity to talk for 1 or 2 minutes about Hotjar, and then we'll dive into the questions right away. So what are the 8 rules that we have at Hotjar that make meetings more enjoyable? Before I go into the 8 rules, I want to say, I've explained something that I think is really important to help you understand like how we think about meetings differently. When people usually think about their own efficiency or like the efficiency of their work, they're usually thinking about their own individual efficiency, right? Like how can they save themselves time? But actually, like the best way we should think about efficiency is how can we save others' time? How can we be more mindful of other people's time? Because that's really, how we can get the biggest gains as a team, right? Because for every minute you save, you might end up wasting, a minute for, 10 other people. So net effect as a team. And as we know, like, working in business is a team sport. So it's really important for us to think about how we can save others' time and how we can think of others' people time as more valuable than our own time. So the first rule that we have is that we have no status update or check-in meetings. You see it quite often, like people invite people to a meeting where they would share an update or they would ask people to share status updates on their end or do like a quick check-in. Usually this saves you time, but it costs a lot of people time to actually, join this meeting. So any status update meeting can and should be done async. The second rule is no one-to-many presentation, right? Presentations. So again, you see it quite often. Someone invites 30 people to a call, has a PowerPoint slide deck, and walks everyone through the presentation. And usually the presenter is the only person speaking. We believe that every one-to-many presentation should be actually done async, and it should be sent as a pre-read, and it's not meant to be seen for the first time during a meeting. And if you want input from people, if you want people to give you meaningful feedback, you also can't expect them to give you meaningful input for something that they see for the first time. And we'll talk about this in a second. Three, every meeting should have pre-reading material, agenda, and a clear objective. So when you invite people to a meeting and you expect them to meaningfully contribute to the discussion, they can be surprised by a complex topic for the first time where they have to think on the spot. You want to give them time to digest, form their own opinions, come up with questions, and join that meeting later. You should have a clear agenda of what you are going to discuss, and you should have a very clear goal for what you want to get out of this meeting, because otherwise you can't really know when you're done. If you don't have a clear direction that you're going towards, you never know that you're there. And speaking of the objective, once you've reached this objective, you should conclude the meeting. A lot of the meetings end up, expanding to take up the entire time that was scheduled for the meeting. But when you have a clear objective, if this objective is achieved in 5 minutes, then this is where you should end the meeting and you should give people time back. Number five, time box discussions and default to 30-minute meetings. So again, it's about really like avoiding the discussions expanding to fit the time versus actually trying to create a forcing function to have like really focused, meaningful discussions. Most meetings can actually be concluded within 30 minutes. And you should see it very rarely that meetings should take more than 30 minutes. And no decisions by committee. Of course, you're encouraged to gather input from multiple people and discuss pros and cons of a decision with others, but every decision should have a single decision maker that is accountable for this decision. So, and this also helps you have like a lot more effective meetings, because when there's a clear decision maker, you're not trying to like get people to agree on the same thing, or you're not trying to like get people to, vote on a decision. You're like always very concise. And then number seven, calendars should not postpone important decisions. So if a decision is urgent, very quickly gather the decision makers, jump on a call immediately and make the decision, and avoid, trying to figure out what's the right spot that works for other people, doing a lot of calendar tetris. And then last but not least, the 10% rule, which is a rule that I like quite a lot. Every participant in the meeting should be expected to contribute by speaking at least 10% of the time. So if you're not speaking at least 10% of the time, you should politely decline attending this meeting. In the comments when I wrote the post, people talked a little bit about how this can encourage maybe the wrong behavior, where people feel that they are forced to speak. But this is not really the intention, because you're looking at the wrong point in time, in my opinion, here. It's not, again, about you joining a meeting and then feeling obliged to speak, but rather for the person inviting others to the meeting, you should think about, is this person that I'm inviting, am I expecting this person to contribute in this meeting more than 10% of the time? And if they're not going to contribute by speaking, then maybe I should just send them the recording on the meeting minutes or something like that afterwards. But also for the person receiving the invite, they should ask themselves, am I someone who would be meaningfully contributing to this meeting, or is it better for me just to get the summary or the update later? So, I hope this was helpful. This was a very quick run through. I don't want to waste your time in a one-to-many presentation here, but I just wanted to do a quick recap. I'm really looking forward to your questions. So please, again, the Slido, go to slido.com. The code is Hotjar Live. Add your questions and we'll take them in 2 minutes. But before we go there, I want to do a shameless plug and take a couple of minutes to talk about Hotjar for those of you who don't know. Hotjar. Hotjar is the product experience insights software of choice for small and medium businesses. People use Hotjar to really, among other things, do the four following use cases. They want to get inspired and discover opportunities on their website. They reduce assumptions and increase confidence, get buy-in and align with the team, and discover issues and prioritize fixes. So get inspired and discover opportunities. Zenprint, for example, using Hotjar, were able to reduce bounce rate by 7% by really A/B testing different changes to their website. Reducing assumptions and increasing confidence. Banner Snack have been able to increase their product usage by 12% by giving more visibility to specific features using Hotjar to identify that opportunity. getting buy-in and aligning with the team. Hustle, they use Hotjar and the Slack integration to find and fix bugs on a weekly basis. And then finally, discovering issues and prioritizing fixes. Student crowd were able to increase conversion rate by 55% by spotting an issue using Hotjar. So if you're interested, go to our website, hotjar.com. We have a free forever plan, so you can use it to get a taste. But also, if you're a business user, there is a 15 days free trial if you want to use some of the more advanced features. So with this, I'll stop here. Invite Adria back uh, to the stage, and we will take your questions.
Hello. Thank you, Mo, for this. Sorry, everyone, if there was some dropping on the screens. We're just, like we said, it's the first live that we do, and we are still learning. So let me share the Slido. We have already one question. So this is from Bruno. Hi, Bruno. Thank you for your question. So Mo, can you talk a little bit more about the rule number 7 and how does it work?
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Bruno, for the question. Again, for the others, feel free to add your questions or comments or anything like that you'd like to participate. So rule number 7, for everyone's reminder, it says calendars should not postpone important decisions. So what this means is the situation that I'm describing, I'm sure you've all seen it in your own work as well, where there is a particular important urgent decision that needs to be made, and you want to have certain stakeholders that you would include in the discussion, or maybe have like a quick chat with before a certain decision needs to be made. But what happens is sometimes these stakeholders are very busy. Their calendars are, completely full. So trying to find a time that works for everyone becomes very challenging, and to find a slot that enables others that actually works for everyone is usually a slot that is a bit further in the future, like a week out, 2 weeks out, things like that. So what happens most of the time is then people block this slot like a week or two out, and the decision only gets made this much later in the future. So what I'm trying to say here, if there is an important decision to be made, we should not let the calendar tetris and like trying to figure out this availability actually delay such an important decision. So instead, what we should do is maybe on Slack or some other chat to connect with the stakeholders and say like, hey, this decision is important. We need to make it within the next 24, 48 hours. Let's very quickly jump on a call and or free up time for us to make this decision together. So that's kind of what I'm trying to say, is that we should not let scheduling postpone important decisions.
Super. Thank you. Thank you, Mo. Bruno, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to drop them in the Slido. We have another question from Enrique coming in. And they say, is there a chance this process could make the meetings a bit too cold? I guess meetings are a chance to connect with peers when working remotely. And a nice, how are you doing, to quick off meeting and 5 minutes of small talk maybe don't hurt.
Yeah, great question. So two things I would like to say about this. So the first one is that it's really important to still, be nice to each other, of course, as you mentioned here. Like every Hotjar meeting that we have, despite, having this really like focused and efficient meetings culture, it usually starts off with, people asking, how was your weekend? How is everything? How is your week going? Things like that. So of course, it's really important to not just like get down to business and start, again with being friendly to each other, but also when I talk about meetings here, I'm talking very specifically about like work related meetings, and here intentionality is very important. So as a fully remote distributed company, of course, it's really important to still build relationships and spend quality time together doing fun and social things. But for these things, we dedicate specific time for, right? And we do not mix the two. If the intention of that block on our calendar and the time we're giving out is for us to spend quality time together and to socialize, then let's make it about socialization. I'll give you an example. Like in the past, we used to have, when we were much smaller, we used to have a Friday meeting, which was like kind of like a Friday demo where people would present the work that they have done for the week. and but it grew too busy too quickly and became, not a very effective call. So when we were trying to figure out what's a better format to do it, some of the questions we got from the team were, okay, like we actually think that this Friday um, uh, regular occurrence is a nice way for us to see each other's faces and to socialize a little and things like this. So what we've done instead, we said, okay, like if we agree that this is something that's really important. So since then, we have what we call like chill jar. We create a Friday recurring appointment where we do like fun things together. It's either we do Airbnb activities, or we invite guest speakers to talk about some interesting topic, or we play games. And this is, of course, in addition to a lot of other social things that we do at Hotjar. We have, gaming groups, we have like different kinds of social interactions, but intentionality is important. Like separating the two, I think makes a big difference.
Thank you, Mo. Really great answer. We have quite some questions coming in. Thank you everyone for submitting. And let's go with Alan. So Mo, you mentioned that decisions should not be taken by committees. Someone should be the decision maker. Can you expand slightly on this? Perhaps giving one simple example. Thank you.
Sure. So decision making, um, effective decision making needs to have two important things, in my opinion. It needs to have accountability. And for accountability to happen, we need to have empowerment, right? And for me, empowerment is a really important thing, right? If we really trust our team and we want to move fast and be successful, we need to empower more and more people to be able to make decisions and to be able to be accountable for their work. So for this to happen, it needs these individuals who are empowered need to have the authority to make decisions about their work. So for every part of the business or for any initiative we're doing, there was always a certain person who would make a particular decision. And to use an example here, let's say right now we are going to have a discussion around increasing the price of one of our products, for example, right? So there can be different points of opinion, like there are different data points that we need to present. There is, like different angles that we need to look into. But ultimately, let's say we would say the VP of product is the person who would make the decision on whether we should increase the price or not. So we would take the time to debate and discuss all the different angles. But then the VP of product is the only person that would make that decision, and they are the person who are responsible also for the consequences of the decision. So later they would be the ones to say, okay, like did we learn from it? Do we have to revert it? Do we need to double down on it, and so on, right? So it's really important that the decision making process, like the democratic process, is a process of sharing information and getting, input and feedback. But when it comes to decision making, it needs to be one person who is empowered to make that decision on their own.
Super. Thank you. Hope Alan that this answered your question. Let's move to next. But first, so Enrique said thanks, Enrique, for participating. And then, so we have two votes here on Allison. So what happens when it comes to things like company-wide all hands? Does the 10% rule where everyone needs to partake still apply?
Yeah, great question. One of the things that, so the version I published internally was a bit longer because it had like more fleshing out for some things. So it's a good opportunity to talk about what in the original version of the post, to what I called like exceptions to these rules. So there are certain things that have some exceptions to these rules that we should maybe take a minute to talk about. One of them are like company-wide events or all hands. I think for these meetings that these rules don't apply because I think they serve a different purpose. A regular work meeting serves the purpose of trying to, get a work product done, versus like all hands or company events. I think that it's about, a lot of times, sharing like really big updates, maybe, team motivation, team morale, things like this. So I think they serve a different purpose, so different rules apply. Other types of meeting where also different rules apply are one-on-one meetings. So I think one-on-one meetings between someone and the direct manager are sacred and they do not fall within these rules. So you should not cancel one-on-one under any circumstances. And if you have to cancel it, you should make sure you move it to a different time because they serve a very different purpose and for your team and for the well-being of the person in your team. So there are some exceptions to these rules. So all hands would be some of these exceptions.
So I keep checking back if I'm muted, but I'm not. Sorry, people. Okay, so thank you, Alison, for the question. Thank you, Mo, for the answer. Moving on to Vakisan. Vakisan has a question on the 10% rule. So how did introverts perceive this rule? They are active listeners usually and won't unnecessarily speak. Sometimes silence is better than junk words. Happy to hear your perspective.
Yeah, no, great question as well. Again, I'll try to think about it. I will try to unpack it and give you a little bit of perspective on it. So the first part of how I would unpack it comes to, again, the responsibility of the person inviting others to the meeting. I think that's really like what I said in the beginning of the session, like the big mind shift here is thinking about other people's time versus your time. So the 10% rule usually applies mostly to the person inviting others, where they have to think about whether these people would be participating actively or not, or am I just like adding them as an FYI, which we see quite a lot. But also for the person receiving the invitation, sometimes maybe someone is assuming they would participate because they have a lot of knowledge on the topic, but they really don't. So they might just say like, what, like this is not a topic I'm very knowledgeable on. So maybe you should, have a smaller group or invite someone else. When it comes to, but the question that you mentioned here about introverts in group conversations, I think it's important. So I'll take a small tangent to talk about it. Because let's say, for example, let's take something like sprint planning, or the kind of team ceremonies that happen on a weekly basis where the entire team will participate anyway, right? Like these, again, these are the kind of meetings that are important for the teams to have on a regular basis, that might have some exceptions to these rules. You have introverts in these groups, and I think it's the responsibility then of the team lead, for example, to be mindful of the introverts within the group and to create a safe space for them to speak, and to also encourage them to maybe voice their opinions. Some tools that could be useful, for example, are a lot of the introverts would not speak because others are always either interrupting or are hogging the conversation because they are speaking all the time. So I think for the team lead or the moderator, it would be nice to try to to acknowledge this and say like, hey, maybe leave a little bit of opportunity. Let's hear from person X or let's hear from person Y and see what they think. I think that these kind of tools are really important to encourage also introverts to participate.
Super. Thank you. Just 1 second. So Malek, no, this one, that was not what. Here, sorry. Kyla Joet, I think you said, would you please post the list of the 8 tips? I just shared on the chat a link to previous most posts, and you can, sadly, LinkedIn doesn't format links as links, so you probably need to copy paste it on the browser, but you can check the link, the list of the 8 points there. Hopefully that works for you. And okay, let's check. Next question. Okay, it's not about the meetings, Mo, but so more curious. Vakisan says again, more curious about the name Hotjar. If we can explain how they arrived at this name, it will be interesting to hear. Since it's probably a short explanation, I just put it.
Yeah, there isn't like really any sophisticated answer to this question. I think maybe David, our founder, would probably explain it better. But it's among a different selection of good names that the founders were thinking about. This is the one that they ended up with. So there is no sophisticated reason for it. So yeah, that's the truth.
Moving on, Malek has another question, and it says, does the 10% rule mean that you're not allowed to invite more than 10 people, including yourself, to a meeting? How is it run and respected in real-time meetings, and do you have someone stating who should speak and for how long?
Excellent question, because 10 is already, like, in my opinion, too many people in one meeting, right? So like 10 it's kind of like the upper bound. So yeah, I completely agree. I would even say like go below 10 if possible. And in terms of like how it's run and respected in real-time meetings, the idea here is not like really to try to police it and count how much time people are participating, but I would say it's more of just like a mental model that you can use to help you like reason about whether someone would be meaningfully contributing to this discussion or not, right? So like don't worry too much if it's like 8% or 12%, but just like, directionally, does it make sense? Do you feel like this is someone who can meaningfully contribute to the discussion or not?
Super. Um, Great answers, more like out of the body, just
Yeah, thank you, Adrian.
anything, everything. Cool. So, going with David now. So, what about conducting a brainstorming session or discussing very new concepts? It is usually hard to set hard rules. I mean, there could be a lot of impromptus. Do you have any tips for or best practices?
A great question as well. I think workshops I would call like things like brainstorming sessions, or like for the engineers in the crowd, things like event storming workshops, or for the the product and designers, product managers and designers, the group like doing user empathy mapping workshops and things like that. These are more workshops than meetings, in my opinion. So I think they don't follow the same rules. Brainstorming sessions are tricky because I think it's one of the things that are also often abused in companies. And I also genuinely believe in general that not all ideas are born equal. This is not to say that idea coming from person X is more valuable than idea coming from person Y. That's not my point. The point I'm trying to make here is that even if we're going into a workshop and we want to come with like valuable ideas that would come out of this discussion, I think they require also a degree of prep. We need to also maybe share some pre-reading material with people that they can get to digest and absorb and process, and so they can come with opinions at least, with ideas and so on. So I think some of these rules would still apply, especially when it comes to like pre-meditation before going into a workshop, just to make sure you have like a really clear an efficient meeting, also having a clear objective, time boxing discussions within the session, and so on. But of course, like there's more free form in these kind of things. But I would say like also be mindful of, if you find yourself in a lot of brainstorming sessions, there is probably like some of this work needs to be done outside of brainstorming sessions.
I really like that answer. Hopefully, you like it too, David. Moving on to next. So, Urabana, hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly. So, curious to know how this works for new hires. So, are they given a bit more leeway to adapt to the meeting culture, or coached beforehand as to how to hold meetings, or given the chance to watch and learn?
Yeah, yeah. Again, no policing, right? Like we're not here to police people's behavior, and it's and showing you like the rules that we follow at Hotjar doesn't mean we're following it 100% of the time. Human beings tend to, sometimes, do things differently. I think there is also in companies and teams there's this general entropy, as I would call it. Like things have a natural tendency to deteriorate, so every now and then you have to, keep this in check, like to review how things are going for your team. Are meetings getting too much, and so on? So for new joiners, it's the same as for existing teams as well. It's always like a pendulum that keeps swinging. So every few months, some of our teams they would find like the calendars are getting too busy, so they would just, like flush the calendar, declare calendar bankruptcy, as Ken Norton puts it in his famous article about meetings, and they would, start fresh and see how they can improve. So it's a continuous learning process.
Yep. Um, I was a new hire a year and a half ago, and if my experience counts, I was just have 10 seconds to say that I could adapt really easily. And to me, the pre-reps or pre-reads for meetings really help. I realized that I'm much more valuable in meetings when there's a pre-read. Otherwise, it's just keep like thinking after when the meeting's done. So yeah, So sorry, I just jumped into CEO here.
No, it's so good. No, I think it's a good input. Thank you, Adrian.
So Enrique, another question. So about sending pre-read presentations, I guess my PowerPoints are not ready to read, meaning they are just highlights to support my pitch. You wouldn't understand it without the presenter. Within your process, I guess I would need to make them more full read kind of PowerPoints, more detailed. Does this make sense or?
We actually do something much better, and here I would promote another company that we're big fans of. We use Loom quite a lot. So instead of typing up everything, we do a lot of documentation anyway. But especially for presentations, people usually record like a 5-minute video of themselves presenting the slides. They share the video with others, and they can watch it on their own pace at 2x speed, things like that. So it's really helpful to think about video for this.
Yes, and since Mohammed asked a similar question, like some people prefer meetings and talking instead of writing, it's the same answer, I'm guessing.
Yes, in a way, but also I think, I would disagree with the premise here of like some people prefer meetings and talking instead of writing. I think it just feels easier for people. I think writing is more involved, but I think writing is probably one of the best skills that anyone in any job should work on. It doesn't mean you need to be a literary writer and write very beautiful piece. I'm not a great writer. But I try to write in a concise and clear way, and that's for me enough. And I think that's a skill that everyone needs to develop. So we need to really push ourselves to do more writing. And everyone starts off not being a great writer, but as you get more feedback and you practice this muscle, you get better at it and you get much quicker at it as well.
Great. Thank you. By the way, Enrique said that they will try to get their boss use Loom, so you lost a referral there. And then jumping to the next question from Christians, have you ever considered other behavioral drives apart from extraversion, like dominance, formality, or patience when running meetings?
Me personally, I'm not, I would lie if I would say like I understand like all the different, variations of personalities and behavior and discussions. But similar to what we were discussing before about like introverts and extroverts, I think, especially for managers and team leads, I think there is a degree of emotional intelligence that you need to be aware of the people, like how they feel in the discussions and what are maybe their things that would prevent them from meaningfully participating in the discussion, and be mindful of this and to try to develop tools to be inclusive of everyone. Yeah.
Super. Okay, moving on. Another one from Vakisan, saying hi from here. Curious again on decision making. Certain decisions, especially tech decisions, are team decisions, since your teams are autonomous and self-managing. So how do segregate team decisions versus individual decisions?
My view is that team decisions should also have individual decision maker. I don't. My personal belief, like maybe I take a step back. Like I believe in general in the highest degree of empowerment for the team, and I think the highest degree of empowerment comes with being able to have the authority to make decisions. And here, when I talk about the team being empowered, it needs to be that every individual in the team, they need to be empowered. So even technical decisions within the team, like at the level of each developer within the team, they need to be able to make their decisions also on whether, like there are many, like again, when we think about decision making, there are thousands of decisions that we make, like it's not just like the very material big decisions that we're talking about. So if like on a continuous basis, like everyone needs to be empowered to make decisions on their own and be accountable for these decisions, because that's really how we learn and how we can make the best decisions we can. Because if someone, I think that when we try to make a decision of a group of people, it really dilutes the value of this decision, dilutes the learning that comes from the decision, and it also I think that reduces the speed of how quickly we move. So I guess a summary of my answer to this question is that every decision should have like one person accountable for this decision.
Great summary. Thank you. Moving on, so we have a question from Elias that's upvoted, and it says, you mentioned that you rely heavily on async communication at Hotjar. Can you elaborate further on when you might utilize text versus video depending on the update checking?
Text is the dominant form, I have to say. A lot of what we do has a lot of documentation. We use Confluence heavily, so a lot of the work that we're doing is very well documented, as to like why we do it, like what are the data points, the decisions that are made along the way, the results of experiments, etc. We use video. The best way to think about it is probably as the best alternative to a one-to-many presentation. If you feel like you want to present something, whether it's a document or a slide deck or something to others, video is the best format because you can share it async. People can consume it at their own pace in a time that works for them at the speed, and they can skip, to the parts that are interesting for them.
Yep, great. Thank you for that. Jumping to a question from Max, and I really like this question. So, how do you keep track of follow-ups after meetings? Sometimes the agenda is there, the action points, but it requires some follow-up to be completed. So, how do you follow up on that?
So follow-ups after meeting, one of usually the owner of that meeting is the person who is inviting others to it. So, but also, two things I would say here. Like, first of all, when you have actions and follow-ups, it's good to assign an owner to each action uh, during the meeting, right? Because I think this is really, again, when it comes to having like the single person accountable for something, it's good to say this action, Adria will do it, this action, Mohannad will do it, and so on. And then the owner of the meeting would be the person who would follow up on this, at the timeline that is also set for the meeting. Because again, back to the actions, I think every action needs an owner, but also needs a deadline. So you can work backwards from deadlines. So you can go at these deadlines and follow up to the team async again on Slack or something. Ask him like what's happening on that. Yeah.
Cool. Great. We have two more questions, both from a webinar. First one says, with reference to Rule 6, what happens if the sole decision made leads to failure in some way? How is that handled?
First of all, then it's great. Then we are learning something. I think that's the beauty of failure, and the best way to think about it is that failure leads to learning, and learning leads to success, right? And I think it's always better to fail than not try something at all. So actually, like failure is something that we take very, very lightly at Hotjar, because if you're a company that is trying to move quickly and you're trying to achieve ambitious results and you're trying to empower people to make decisions, and you're trying to approach things that are new to you and maybe new in general, and haven't been done before, then you are bound to make mistakes. So the most important thing, when we fail, is just to say, like, to have a clear idea of what happened, why did it happen, like, and understand like the root cause of it, and figure out like how can we do it better the next time. And that's it. And once we are able to articulate this, we move on and we don't talk about the mistake and we don't talk about the failure, because that's part of the job. Like, failure is equally part of the job as success is. So that's how we approach it. Yeah.
And we're jumping on to the last question, also from a webinar. What happens if a team member isn't adhering to the meeting guidelines? How are they prompted if stick to the script, privately or publicly, or does it just come naturally?
Um, at Hotjar, in general, like, we're a transparent company, so we talk about these things like very publicly most of the time. But sometimes, of course, like, it's again based on the person you're working with, and different people receive feedback differently. So again, it depends on the situation. You would give this feedback privately. Probably like we don't police it, but what would happen in this case, if you would get like a meeting invite that doesn't have an agenda, maybe you would reach out to the person and say like, hey, I think I don't know what this meeting is about. Could you please share an agenda? Could you please share the pre-read material, things like this? And again, this doesn't happen all the time. So I think what's really important is that as a team, you have this habit of like retrospecting on how things are going. Are you trying to be efficient with meetings and so on? So like taking, every, let's say, a couple of months or something, taking a moment to look back and see how things are going and how can you improve your meeting culture. This also helps, changing it from like an individual not adhering to the meeting guidelines versus, like how are we protecting our meetings culture and like everyone's time.
Really great. So we run out of questions from the meetings, but there's two questions that are unrelated to your meetings post. Do you want me to take them?
Let's do them since we have a few minutes left.
Okay,
Let's do it.
super. So there's one question from Enrique that says, a bit out of topic, hope you don't mind. Because you can hire professionals from so many countries and cities, I guess you have massive numbers of candidates for each job opening. How is your screening process?
It's not very different from most companies. So we do CV screening at the first stage. For many roles, like the next stage would be like a video stage where we have a number of questions that candidates would receive as a questionnaire, and then they would answer them in, I think, 30-second videos or 1 minute videos. I can't remember the exact time limit. But there are other roles where we don't do the video stage, where there is a recruiter screen and call where someone would speak with the candidate afterwards. So it's not very different. We're lucky to have a large number of candidates, but I'm not sure if it's that much more than companies of our size. So well, hard for me to tell, but it's the good news. It's like it's a good volume of candidates, but it's so far manageable, and our talent acquisition team are doing a great job managing this pipeline.
Yes, and I see Simon shamelessly plugged the careers.hotjar.com on the chat. Thank you, Simon. And then there's another question from Mohammed. It says, unrelated to the topic, do you think managers should be technically strong, as Elon Musk stated? You know the
Yes, yes,
reference?
yeah, I'm aware of that tweet. Um, I think they should be strong to a certain limit. So I think in my mind, like I give you like a sort of like rule of thumb, kind of. I think the manager should be the equivalent of like a senior person in the team. I don't think the manager should be like the most technically skilled person on the team, because I think the skill sets that the person needs to have as a manager are very different from an individual contributor. But I believe that it really helps a lot for the manager to have a good understanding of the technical challenges of the people that are reporting to them. But they don't have to be like the ace technical person on their team.
Fully agree. We received another unrelated topic. So since it's 10 minutes, do you want to take it?
Yes, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, cool. By the way, Baki-san said thank you, and we
Thank you,
like the
Vaki-san.
discussion. We really like it too, Baki-san. Thank you for your questions. And then we have a question from Elizabeth, also unrelated topic. Every organization faces ups and downs, and naturally there will be times when it's hard to see positives. How do you keep going every day?
I love this question because I think I had this discussion recently with someone I was chatting with. Um, it's and this is a really perhaps like relevant in this point in time that we're in, because I think when we think about the macroeconomic climate right now, we hear in the US like a lot of stories now about startups going on a layoff spree. Many companies are tightening their P&Ls and balance sheets because everyone was worried about going into a recession and things like that. So we might be approaching like a little bit of tough times, right? We had also the 2 years of COVID behind us. So when when companies are actually winning, when things are going well, you don't see the problems of the culture, you don't see the problems of the company, because everyone, it's like everyone is on that high, everyone is on the, we're all winning and we're having a great time because we're feeling a lot of self accomplishment and we're achieving great things. But it's really like when things get tough is really where you see like the culture of the company playing a really, really big role. And it's really in these moments where you see people like really struggling, or you see a lot of people leaving the companies, or as the question puts it, finding it difficult to keep going. I think we are lucky at Hotjar because we have been conscious to invest in culture from day one, irrespective of whether we're winning or not, irrespective of whether we're doing well or not, because we have like really strong convictions on what is the right way to build the business and what's the right way to build the culture. So when things got tough for us, for example, during the 2 years of COVID, um, we actually saw not only, things continuing to do well, we actually saw the team coming together as a community, being there for each other, rallying and so on. So I guess to answer your question, to make a long story short, I think every organization, if you want to be prepared for tough times, you need to take the opportunity when things are going well and when things are positive, to consciously double down on your culture and to make sure you're creating an environment that is people first, that is caring, that is mindful, of everyone's well-being, so that when things get tough, you're able to be resilient and you're able to really withstand, the waves. So that would be my advice. Yeah.
Very wise advice. Yes. So that's the end of all of the questions that we had on Slido, and we are reaching the end of the hour that we had slotted. Any last comments or anything else that you want to say?
No,
Or
I just want to
can we
say
close?
thanks to you, Adria, for emceeing this call and for helping out with the setup, and thanks everyone who joined us. This was our first live session, so it wasn't the smoothest, but I hope it was a nice session for you. I enjoyed the questions and the discussion, and I hope you got something useful out of it. And I hope to see you soon on perhaps another live session sometime in the future.
I really loved it, so I might try to bring other Hajarians onto the live sessions. And for the people that's still on the live, if I know there's been some technical issues also from joining the chats, the official meeting, and then this. If you can leave any feedback or anything, what you felt about the chat or the live meeting on the comments, that'd be great, and then we know how to improve, because it's really the first time that we go live, and we will do better. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are based, and happy. Ciao, ciao.
Bye bye.